Thank you so much. I wanted to just really start with the origins of the project. I understand this was a play written by Madhuri Shekhar, performed first around 2014, and then it was adapted for the screen by Eric Randall. You've also written screenplays. You co-wrote the screenplay for Called Jane, great film. Can you talk a little, and you wrote in your director's statement that it was really personal for you. So can you talk about sort of the process, how the material came to you? Did Eric and you collaborate, infuse parts of your life into it? Obviously, the lead character is a doctor, as you are 9 weeks out of the year here. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's based on a play that was first performed in 2014 and has been intermittently performed since. It's actually still on stage in Austin right now, so it's never stopped being performed. But it was converted into a screenplay by Eric Randall, who's phenomenally talented, and then came to me in 2019, actually, originally, as a director and for Karan as an actor, respectively. And I had actually only just come out. The next thing that arrived was the script. At the time, it almost felt like too personal, but I was intensely interested in making it, and we've essentially been trying to make the movie since then, through various twists and turns. We did both work on the script after we received it in various ways. One was making the lead character a doctor, for obvious reasons that I won't elaborate on. And then the second was just adding things that felt culturally true to us. Karan is an actor, but he's also really a writer and improvises a lot of his own dialogue. For example, the scene where he's texting, all of those are improvised lines that he's coming up with in the moment. I had developed tenosynovitis in my wrist, partly as a result of working in the hospital, clicking all the time. And I was doing voice to text all the time around the house, and people who have worked with me in the hospital have seen me do this as well. I dictate emails and texts all the time. And Karan had been listening to all of that, and he put it in the movie because he just thought it was funny because I'm so deadpan when I do it. And I'm saying like, ha, ha, ha. He loved that. I wanted to put that in the movie. But things like that percolated out of our real life. There's a crazy wedding planner at the end. That was also not in the original script. Karan wrote that entire scene based on his own experiences, I guess, with wedding planners.
It's nothing like an Indian wedding planner. They'll fleece you till the very end. Yeah, you got to bribe. Yeah, and then the actor was amazing because he was never in the script that he's emotional at the wedding, but he gave the character a full arc because he started out like this ruthless businessman, but if you watch the movie closely, he's crying in the background when we're getting married, and we were all like, no one told him to do that, but he like went on a journey from like homo wedding to like weeping at the homo wedding, which was really something we can't take credit for.
We cannot, no.
So were you two together when the project came to the table? How did you get involved? Just by
we were kind of a package deal when we came because our first movie, 7 Days, I had directed and Karan had starred in. Was
amazing film, by the way. Check it
out. Was the reason they contacted us. So it was kind of understood that it would be both of us. The person we didn't know was Jonathan Groff. And that was a cold submission. But he had seen 7 Days, that movie, which Karan is the lead of, and he really liked 7 Days. And he actually asked in our first meeting if the lead of 7 Days could be the lead of this movie. But he had watched it and assumed Karan was straight, I guess because of his performance or whatever. But he was like, do you think he could play gay? And I was like, he could play gay. He is gay. We're gay. I explained all that. And he was immediately interested and he came on board, but he was, that wasn't actually many months after we first signed on.
Yeah, and he's terrific. I mean, the entire cast, can you talk, it was Zarna Garg, who I know there are probably several fans of hers in the audience. But for those who don't know her, Instagram, I think, is a great place to start. Yes. Incredible comedic talent. Sunita Mani, who many people probably saw in Glow or Mr. Robot. Harish Patel is sort of a Bollywood legend. How did you get all these incredible, and not to mention the wedding planner, all these supporting characters, how did you get them all together for the project?
A lot of them are people we know. Zarna I didn't know, but Karan did. She was big on Instagram. She has a crazy life story for those not familiar with it. She was a housewife until 5 years ago when she started performing stand-up on the New York subway during the pandemic. And she blew up. There are all these viral TikToks of her performing stand-up. And then she eventually launched her own sort of platform, and then that's quickly become very large. She now has a CBS multicam pilot called Zarna that was just shot last month, so she's exploded. But when we first contacted her to do the movie, she had never acted before. But I felt that there was something about her that she didn't even need to act. She's just playing herself. And she had never been on a set, never stood in front of a camera, never had an eye line, never hit a mark, none of those things. But she learned how to do that incredibly quickly because she's very smart. And she has been the backbone of the movie in so many ways because she's she's been also the backbone of the marketing. And she's a very good demonstration of what like an Indian immigrant mother can do. And if you let one into Hollywood, like watch out, because she is a force. She is a force.
She also reminded us every day the only reason she said yes was not the script, not to work with me, but because the director was a doctor.
All kinds of benefits. I want to talk about the Bollywood angle. First of all, I found it fascinating in talking with you earlier that you said you hadn't really seen any non-Bollywood films until about 2017. So I would love to know a bit about that. And of course, DDLJ plays such a large role in this film. I know the playwright says she wrote the play in part as an homage to it, and structurally there are similarities. Can you both talk about your relationship to that film in particular, but to Bollywood movies in general, and how it influenced this film?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised almost entirely on a diet of Bollywood. My mom, who's here today, showed us these VHS tapes that we would play and rewind and play of all the latest Bollywood movies that I think were largely plagiarized and then brought over on VHS. But we loved watching them, and we really watched nothing but Bollywood. So I grew up with a very particular form of filmmaking, because Bollywood is so florid, to put it lightly. And especially if you're in America, it seems so like grossly sentimental, corny, insane, ludicrous, absurd. And when you watch a movie in India, which I've only had the experience of doing once, Karan has done many more times, it's not the American experience of watching a movie. The American experience of watching a movie is hushed reverence, everyone's quiet. In India, everyone's like in the aisles dancing and yelling, taking phone calls. Like, it's such a loud communal experience, and that was so... I was raised more with that, actually, than with the American form of filmmaking. That definitely influenced me. But I always felt this back and forth, where on one hand, I was very embarrassed by Bollywood movies. Then on the other hand, I was like hopelessly in love with them. So that was partly what went into this movie. And the line about the being embarrassed of the bigness of love is like a sort of direct expression of that sentiment.
What about you, Karan?
Yeah, I grew up in India until I was 18. Then I came out to America to go to college. So I watched Hollywood movies, but I watched a lot, mostly Bollywood movies. And the thing that really, I thought was really special and the heart of the movie really to me was so many people that aren't represented in those movies. So like who are not straight couples, like those are the only love stories you see over and over again. And I hadn't really understood like how sometimes damaging that can be to only see one version of love in that big spectacle way, which is so fun, where everyone goes and enjoys it in a movie theater together. So that's what felt so special about this, that we were getting the chance to potentially do a version of that and like have people celebrate a different version almost of love with like people maybe you haven't seen, but hitting a lot of those same marks. Like we have a dance sequence and we have big romantic gestures and the parents get involved in the love story. These are all kind of classic tropes, but it felt like we were reinventing it in a way that maybe hadn't been done before, that felt really special.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask about, the reaction you've had, because you've been on the festival circuit, and this film was released first in New York, LA, a few other cities last week. Can you talk about, I imagine there must be a lot of people connecting with this precisely because of that this isn't a Bollywood story that you grew up watching necessarily.
Yeah, I've received so many Instagram messages and text messages and emails and all kinds of communications and WhatsApp messages from people who feel really seen by the movie and had a very particular experience, people who've gone back 2 or 3 times, people who've come back with their own mom or a sister or siblings or family. So that's all been really gratifying because it was made in such a vacuum. Independent movies are hard. When we release them, we sometimes feel like we're releasing them into a vacuum. That's a little truthfully what 7 Days felt like. This has not, fortunately. And we've gotten the experience of sharing it with audiences like this one.
Great. Well, I didn't want to ask too many questions because I know there are people in the audience who want to chime in. So if you want to raise your hand, I can repeat the question. Right there in front.
So firstly, congratulations on an amazing film. I think it's so much fun for all of us to watch. I just wanted to ask about the this wonderful relationship with Jonathan. It's such a magical, there's so much chemistry between the two of you. Was that there right from the start, or did you sort of cast him because of that, or did it develop over a period of time? I just wanted you to address your relationship because it's just so wonderful on screen.
Great. So it's a question about the chemistry between Jonathan Groff and Karan, which is amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, no, we only met once before we started filming. We had one dinner in New York a year before we made the movie. And then Jonathan was filming Doctor Who, so we had already started filming this movie, and he joined. His first day was the day I bring him home to meet the family. That was the first scene we shot, and everything that happens. So it was a very big day. And it kind of felt perfect because there was a little awkwardness between me and him because we were just working for the first time together, and I'd already filmed some with the family, so they felt familiar to me, so it kind of felt perfect. But then Jonathan is just the most lovable person on the planet. No one has to do anything. Everyone falls in love with him. Multiple straight women on this movie were like, maybe I can convert him. And like, they literally came up to me and they were like, do you think? And I was like, I don't think so. But that's just who he is. Once we were filming when he sings the song to me after the movie, and we were just filming and Roshan was giving him some direction. We were just walking on the street and he stopped us both. He's like, you guys, there's a heart on the ground. And someone had just like drawn a heart on the ground and he stopped the conversation to point that out. So he just is the most easy person to fall in love with. But we were so lucky to have him. And then the other thing we hadn't really thought about was, everyone kept being like, is it going to be awkward as a couple to like do this movie and all this stuff? And we hadn't really thought about it because it's so hard to make a movie. And we were just like, let's just get to the beginning and then we'll figure it out. But eventually we were like, we're so lucky it's Jonathan because he was so supportive of us and the movie, and he made us feel so comfortable with some of the awkwardness of all of that too.
And it's hard to like describe he had no preparation for the movie. So we didn't like train him on Indian culture or something or explain anything to him before he came. And when he did the DDLJ scene, that was the craziest thing because in the script, he's just supposed to say Tujhe Dekha, like he's just supposed to do the beginning of it. But when we performed it, when cameras were rolling, we didn't rehearse because there was no time. We shot that whole scene in 45 minutes. But when cameras were rolling, he started singing the whole thing like he does there, where he's doing the male and female parts. He's doing falsetto on the la 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 la. He's doing the percussion on his chest, and I thought it was terrifying. I was like, this is the craziest thing. It was so theater kid. I was like, whoa. And then I was like, we were gonna cut this, never use it. I felt embarrassed, like everybody felt embarrassed. But then we of course used it in every single cut. It's my favorite part of the movie. It was like crazy to see him do that because he's doing the pronunciation pretty well for someone who's not a native Hindi speaker, doing the entire song of Tujhe Dekha, which he had watched on YouTube once on the plane over and committed to memory based on that because of his ear.
That is amazing. Other questions? Okay, right in the front.
So I'm a huge fan of the original play, and while there's like a huge there's like a huge impact about like family, but like was the idea of like chosen family as well like also like important to like include in this film?
Okay, talking about the original play and the importance of including chosen family in the film.
Yeah, it was, and that was an addition of Eric's to the script, that while Naveen has his family, his biological family, Jay has no family, but he has the family he's gathered around him, his sort of quirky friends. And I thought that was a really interesting mirror thing, because it's obviously often the case for queer people. And he really fleshed out that whole thing. You know, one of the things that was important to us was the whole concept of family in the movie, because it's very classic in an American rom-com not to consider the family, with the exception of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. But things like Sex and the City, for example, you never meet Carrie's parents. Or do they exist? Are they dead? Like, she never introduces any of her partners to them. That's the American way of falling in love. It's ruggedly individualistic. But the Indian way of falling in love, or at least our experience of it, is that you fall in love in the context of your family. I was raised in a very close family, my mom and brother, and the idea of loving someone in isolation from them is literally inconceivable to me. So those were the things that we were, because of the way I was raised and the way that you were raised, so we were trying to bring those things to the fore.
Right. Back there, go ahead.
Hi there. I really wanted to say thank you to Karan, first of all. In Deadpool, when the music of Slutties comes on for the first time, it's something that I can't tell you what that moment meant to me as an Indian growing up in America, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And with this film, I'd love to know a little bit more about the songs that you chose, the music that went into it, the Let the Music that opens it, that those of us that are familiar with it, the things that hold so close to us. Firstly, thank you for that representation, and really a little bit more about what went into the choices of that. And thank you, lastly, for the mystery of the queer representation with the South Asian one. Those two pieces don't always mix nicely, and so to see it this way is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
The music we chose basically based on what we could afford and if we could contact the rights holder. It was the craziest thing if you try to get in touch with the rights holder of a Bollywood song, like God Be With You, because it's just very difficult. We were able to get a lot, I forget if it's Tips or T-Series, but one of them is co-shared by Universal Music Group, so they're easy to license. So it actually came on a list of movies we could get to. We both love Badtameez Dil. Karan is actually a huge fan of the original movie, and I was more so a fan of the song. So we love that song. It costs an extraordinary amount of money. It's insane how much that song costs. DDLJ, in contrast, was really cheap, and we were actually able to get the song for DDLJ and the footage of it for almost nothing because the director of that movie gave permission for the first time ever for us to license footage from DDLJ, which was obviously a very sweet thing for him to do for this particular movie. But Aditya Chopra sort of has that reputation for being kind and generous like that. And then Jalebi Baby is just a song, you know, that entered all of our lives at one point, and for better or for worse. And it was just stuck in our heads, and we were like, what if we ended the movie on Jalebi Baby? Obviously, Jalebi Baby has a connotation that I don't know to what extent.
Don't bring it up here. This is a wholesome crowd. Your mom is here.
I won't say anything
Google
about what
it if you're
Jalebi Baby
curious.
may be about, but we ended up using it regardless, and Tesher, the artist of Jalebi Baby, was kind enough to give us full permission to use it. So.
Great. Additional questions? Over there.
Hi, Karan, this is a question for you. So I feel like your career spanned a lot of different genres, from comedy to horror to now romance. And I guess I'm curious, stepping into this genre, what were you the most excited for initially, and then what are you the proudest of walking away from?
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, Karan's career spanning many genres, from horror to comedy to romance, and what were you most excited about with stepping into this genre?
Yeah, I feel like my career is like the career of most working actors in Hollywood, which is random because it's like whoever chooses to hire me. But what was really special about this movie particularly was when I initially started auditioning in Hollywood in 2009, very different time. Someone, I think they were well-meaning, but they told me, you have two things. You can't have two things. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you're Indian and you're gay. You can't be both. It's two strikes against you. And I was like, oh my God. And so I was like, well, I can't change the way I look, so I guess I'll just suppress the gay part. And so I had never really played something before this where I feel like I was able to bring both sides of me, or those two sides of me, out at the same time. And again, it was like, oh my God, I've been like suppressing one or the other the entire time, depending on what the job is and what it requires. So that's what felt really, really special about this, is that I got to sort of fully be myself, for better or worse. But it was like the most gratifying experience, and I don't take it lightly because it's a luxury to do that in any job. And so this one really felt like, in a weird way, it's gonna sound morbid, but I was like, once we finished this movie, I was like, if I die tomorrow, I did it all. Like, I really had this feeling of like, I got to fully be myself on like a movie once. So that felt really special.
Great. Way in the back there.
So, as a fellow medical provider, just interested, how did you make time for both film and being a provider?
The basic question is, when do you sleep, Roshan? As a medical provider and a filmmaker, how do you have the time to do this? And did I read that your first novel is being published this year as well? So just in case anyone was not.
Well, I am fortunate to have a very unusual arrangement at Brigham Dana-Farber that many people here are familiar with, where I'm only essentially covering call for 9 weeks of the year. And then for the rest of the year, I am full-time in Los Angeles, writing and directing. So I have an extraordinary degree of liberty, an arrangement that, again, is unusual, made possible by Daphne, who's here as well, which I'm very grateful for.
Shout out to Daphne.
Because that's not coming around every day. I will say that, that there have been two really important forces in me being able to carve two careers. One is my mother, who has encouraged me to just do everything since I was little. She found like 3 pieces of paper that I had written a story on. She stapled them together and she was like, he wrote a book. She went around to people and she was like, he wrote a book. Did you see this book? So she's always made it seem like anything was possible. So I literally, it never even seemed crazy to consider multiple careers, because my mom was doing things that are frankly like way crazier than what I've gotten up to. And then the second thing is Daphne again, because I actually got my first writing job on a medical show called Code Black. And when I got the offer, I got it 5 weeks before I was supposed to start PGY2, which is right after intern year, when you're really starting residency. And so I had to email the entire leadership of the Harvard Radiation Oncology program and say, in 5 weeks, I could be in a writing room if you let me postpone residency for a year, which was obviously a hugely scary and dangerous thing to do in some ways. But Daphne had just come on as chair, and she found the whole thing, I think, like a little amusing and interesting. And she said, go ahead. And because of that, I entered the Writers Guild and later entered the Directors Guild, and I wouldn't have worked on this movie were it not for that. So those things, it takes like such a village for anyone's career.
That's great. Over there.
Hi, I was really curious as to the role that religion might have played. You did a whole part of the ritual. I was curious, kind of what were the internal conversations about what you were going to present, how you were going to make it clear, because those rituals are designed for man and woman, at least in the modern context. So you can speak excited.
Yeah, that was a huge source of consternation for me. I'm not like intimately familiar with the rituals in the wedding, and that really stressed me out because I don't know what they're chanting, when they do, all their things are going around, they're going the other direction. Like it seems very complicated and important. So we got a pundit involved then who refused to help because it was a gay wedding. Then we contacted another pundit who texted me a gay slur. Then we contacted another pundit who eventually did help us. He claimed to be Priyanka Chopra's personal pundit, a fact we never verified. We don't know if that's true, but he would do Zooms with us from his convertible as he was driving through Malibu, and he sent a 75-page document on how to do a Hindu wedding, and he put his picture on every page. So that was very charming, very Indian, and I was like, this is great, and he helped us design what we believe is a completely accurate wedding ritual. There are several liberties taken for the purposes of filmmaking. Like you said, it's highly gendered, which we ignored and reversed wherever we could. And we weren't sure actually how people would react to it when we staged the final wedding, where they're walking around and they kiss each other and they walk out, because all of those extras who are in that scene had not been briefed on the subject matter. So they arrived into that tent to see that. And they stood up spontaneously at the end and threw flowers. It was really moving. And then an uncle came up to me after and he said, there is something wrong with that wedding. And I was like, what? And he was like, they are supposed to do 5 clockwise, then 2 counterclockwise. It's like, whatever. I mean, you're not going to see in a movie, like you're cutting through that. We barely see them go around twice. But I was actually very gratified that that was the only note he had to share.
Great, and I think we have time for a couple more. Right over there.
Thank you. Sorry, the audience is more of a personal question for me. Karan, when you were in the couch at night doing your verbal text, there was a picture that came up. Was that Donnie with Charlie?
Yes, it is. It's one of the producers, Charlie, and then his now husband, Donnie. Yes, the big thing in movies that people don't know is any image, everything has to be cleared. So it's like, who's going to sign the picture release? And we were like, well, our producer is going to sign it. And then also in the movie is Roshan's brain MRI. Who noticed that? Because there's a scene where I'm studying a brain MRI, and I guess you also need to get that cleared by the patient whose MRI it is, and he had a brain MRI once, and it is now forever on screen. So when people say it was a personal movie, it really was. Yeah.
Yeah, for those of you in the room who know, I had an MRI of my brain done for what turned out to be a completely benign thing, but I had to keep doing surveillance MRIs that were ordered by Linda B, for those who know. We couldn't find an MRI to use, so we just used mine. But there is a finding. If you rewatch the movie, just pause and see if you can. I'm looking at Eyal because I feel like just see if you can find it for the doctors out there.
Okay, last question. We'll go over there.
Hey, Roshan. A couple questions. One, I was curious about the location where this took place. We got the sense that it wasn't in India, and that there was probably some. So one, like, where did this take place, and what thought went into sort of what you revealed about the location? And additionally, I could imagine part of the storyline that is relevant is also from the immigrant experience. It's not just the relationship with the family, but the relationship with the community, sort of different permutations of that. I was curious how you decided how much of that to sort of put into the movie. And then finally, I just wanted to express a little bit of disappointment that the doctor wasn't a radiation oncologist.
Nobody knows what a radiation oncologist is. So I was like, this is the lost battle. But it takes place in an unnamed city, and the idea was to make it feel as universal as possible. So it's shot in Vancouver, but we deliberately don't acknowledge where in North America it could be taking place. And the immigrant part is part of the fabric of our lives. Karan literally immigrated here from India, and I immigrated here from Canada, but my parents immigrated from India to Canada. So it was always in the fabric of the story in a lot of ways. It was, when we made this movie, all the things that are currently under threat, immigrants, queer people, all that stuff, was not so much in the zeitgeist. And now, obviously, it's interesting to release a movie that is about the joy and inner lives of those people, just at a time when they're being questioned in a lot of ways. So now it has become, it always feels different now to me when I watch it than it did when we were making it. Interestingly, it was financed and produced in a much more progressive era than the one it's being released in.
So, okay, we'll do one more, because you're right in the front.
Guys, congratulations on making a movie. A miracle. I have a question, because I always think it's really important for audiences to hear. I work in the business too. I really appreciate, Roshan, what you put on Instagram about the viewing audiences these days and who they are and what they should see and what we have a responsibility to make. But I'd love for you to talk about what you think your responsibility is as an Indian filmmaker. Like, what comes first for you, and what responsibility do you feel towards the kinds of stories that all of us should be making?
Yeah, I personally, so the question was about what responsibilities I feel as an Indian filmmaker, and I personally try not to think too much about what we owe in terms of representation of South Asians, because I almost think that becomes an undue burden. The thing that I have been trying to push more and more in the last few years within Hollywood is the idea that our audiences are very diverse. And I think more and more, especially in the Trump era, the studios have moved towards greenlighting more movies that feel almost regressive, like they belong to another era. And I think that's the wrong move, because we live in a country that is extremely heterogeneous. And what we watch isn't a reflection of who we are. For example, Red, White, and Royal Blue was a very popular gay movie on Amazon, and its audience was 70% women. Similarly, for this movie, 70% of the people who engage with this movie on Instagram are women, and it tested highest with white women. None of the things that you would expect based on just looking at the poster. So this idea that only diverse audiences would ever want to see a diverse cast, or only that we need to cast more and more white actors in a movie to keep it as universal as possible, which is a thing that people actually say all the time, is, I think, false, because we are all keenly interested in each other. And that's the thing that I keep trying to emphasize more and more as I go further into the industry. We've shared this movie now with many audiences, and we've never seen its reaction depend on your race or your gender or your sexuality. But many executives in Hollywood would expect there not to be an audience for this movie simply because of how niche it is perceived to be.
And I just want to note the cheers that we just heard. That's our former balcony there, which is now Movie House 2. We had a sold-out 7:30 screening, and I think that was the audience reaction that came through. So hit on both floors at the Coolidge. But again, please spread the word. This film is playing at the Coolidge the next couple of weeks, but even beyond that, we need to get people in the house. So please spread the word. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
for this
much.
wonderful film and for being here.